School is using Google Forms to collect survey information from students or staff, and you're also using Google Sheets to organize some of your student data. Being able to merge the two together into a single spreadsheet is pretty simple. We're going to do a little bit of formatting and use a function known as vLookup. So for those that have used Excel, it might make sense. So here I've got a spreadsheet that has just some basic information and a handful of students. And what I want to do is I want to match this information that I have here with some student voice data that I collected previously. So when students completed the Google form, you'll see it collected their username here, which is their ID and or basically their email address. And so what I want to do is I want this information to be accessible to me here in the student data that I have, and I want to have a match up. So the first thing that I'm going to do is bring in my student voice data into my existing spreadsheet with student data. So you can do this a couple of ways. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to make a copy of this and add it to the student data sheet. So here at the bottom where it says sheet 1, I'm going to click that down arrow and I'm going to click copy to. This is going to allow me to bring the whole sheet over. So I'm going to search for my student data sheet, and there it is. And I'll click select, and you'll see that it's copied it over. So I'll click OK. So now I'm going to jump over to my student data, and you'll see a new tab has been added where it made a copy of those responses. The next piece is to actually format this student data a little bit to make the actual matching up a little bit easier. I know I'm not going to need this timestamp column, so I'm just going to delete that. I also need to make sure that I have student's ID here in the left-hand column rather than their email address. So that way I have ID here, and I'll have ID here in the first column for both spreadsheets. So to make the change here, I'm going to do a find and replace and get rid of this extra at mcpsmd.net or whatever your domain is. So I'll click Edit, Find and Replace. And I'm looking for at mcpsmd.net, and I don't want to replace it with anything. So I'll click Replace All. And click OK. And then Done. And so as you can see, it's removed the at mcpsmd.net. So in this column, I'm left with username, or really, which is student ID, and same thing here. So at this point, we're in really good shape to start matching up our information. So I moved back to my student data here. This is where I want to bring in that student voice data. And what I'm going to do is I want to find out if Delaney here has any responses for my form. So I'm going to click into this column here that's empty, this F, and type equals vLookup, and then open parentheses. So it's asking me, okay, what do I want to look up? What do I want to use to find this match between the two sets of information? And that's going to be student ID. So I'm going to click on Delaney's student ID here, and then I'm going to click comma. Now it wants to know, where am I going to look for this information? Where should it look for Delaney's student ID? And I'm going to jump back over to my student responses from the survey, and it should look in this data set somewhere. So I'm highlighting all the columns for this set of information from A to, in this case, E. And then click comma. The next piece, this index option, says, all right, once we locate the IDs in both places, what column do you want it to return? Meaning, which information do you want it to bring over? And I want it to bring in the information that's currently sitting in the second column, or column B. So instead of clicking B or typing B, I'm going to type 2 for the second column. Then I'm going to click comma. And the next piece is it's going to ask whether or not this information is sorted, and since it's not, I'm going to write false. And then I'm going to close my function, or close the parentheses here, and hit enter. And in this case, it says there's no data, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this function down all the way and see if it worked. And what do you know? In this case, what this tells me is that Delaney has not yet completed my student voice survey. However, several of my other students have. And so the name of this column is I Learn Best When. So I can copy that, and I can bring that in here. So now I've copied that information, and this formula has brought it over. So now I need to bring over my next column, which is I have a hard time when. So I'm just going to copy that header so I know and paste that here. And again, I'm going to use that same vLookup function. So I'm back here at my student data, I'm going to type equals vLookup, open parentheses, and I want it to look for Delaney student ID again, comma, determine what range, which is this information over here, or my student survey information, comma, and then what column or column do I want it to return? This time I want it to return column 1, 2, 3, or column C. And again, I'm going to put false, that this information is not sorted, and hit return or enter. Last but not least, I'm going to drag this function down for all of my students, and you'll see it begins bringing over the information that I had previously over here based on student's ID. So even though I had two separate spreadsheets, I was able to bring the information together into one through the use of vLookup. So that's how you can take some of the information that you have in Google Forms and be able to match it up to some information that you might have in Google Sheets.